Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My panel has been assembled as we speak. Together with us, we have the Ambassador of Norway, Mr. Frode Overland Andersen. I would like to invite also Mr. George Alexandratos, representing the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping and the Hellenic Short Sea Association. Mr. Alexandratos is the Vice President of the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping and Secretary of the Hellenic Short Sea Shipping Association. Unfortunately, we don't have together with us Mr. Simantonis, the president of the Hellenic Short Sea Shipping Association, due to illness, but my very good colleague, Mr. Ioannis Hyotopoulos, the DNV Regional Manager for East Mediterranean, Middle East and Africa, is here with us. And last but not least, from National Technical University in the School of Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering, Professor Dimitrios Lyridis is together with us as well. In this panel, we're going to talk about revolution, which is always a tricky subject, and it can also be a little bit provocative as well. The theme is how we decarbonize and how we lead the green revolution when it comes to short sea and coastal shipping. Decarbonization is a fact. It is happening around the globe. It is happening in all ship segments. However, the right mix of technologies, solutions and frameworks applicable to each segment can be drastically different. Short sea shipping and coastal shipping is a ship segment by its own right, having dedicated and specific needs to be covered, and we are here to explore or to debate on what would be the right mix of technologies, but not only technologies, also the structural frameworks and instruments, investment and funding instruments that need to be in place in order to achieve the greening of short sea shipping without, of course, compromising the business potential out of it. On the technology side, we see acceleration in the uptake of technologies in all ship segments. This is also happening in short sea shipping solutions, on passenger ferry solutions, but not in an even pace. In fact, we see technologies that in few years ago we could have considered them as extremely futuristic. What I can say is that the future is here now, but it is not evenly distributed. Across ship segments, across geographies, we see a different mix of technologies and different pros and cons coming around. So we're trying to see what that means for our geography, what it means for Greece, which of course it is a geography that short sea and coastal and passenger shipping is extremely important and vitally linked to the other, let's say, sectors of the economy as well. So, in order to start this, we may hear from the example of Norway. Norway, one might think that it is a country directly opposite in our continent, in Europe, but I think that we have very significant affinities with Norway. First and above all, a common and very strong maritime traditions. We are both maritime nations. The second is that the geographical morphology and the needs for coastal shipping is quite similar, I should say. So, I would like to invite Mr. Andersen to tell us the story of Norway and what can be learned for Greece as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dimopoulos. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I'll be rather brief in explaining the Norwegian history and Norwegian take on this, and try to sort of end on a note about what on earth this means for Greece, because that's the interesting subject, not what we did. Just to sort of take you, I don't know, there are probably not many experts on the Norwegian ferry industry in the audience, so I'll be kind enough to explain a bit. Take you back to 2014, 2013, when Norway started to look into the electrification of our ferry industry. There were five reasons we went into this. First of all, we had an ailing ferry fleet. Second, we had a slump in the shipbuilding market, so they needed something to do. Third, we had the knowledge that there would be, as the previous speaker just said, there would be a change in the legislation and a change in the regulation which favored zero emission or low emission vessels. Fourth, we had a large domestic market. And fifth, we had political will. And remember those five, because I will get back to them. So in 2013, 2014, we started sort of looking into how to launch electric ferries in Norway. And by 2015, we launched the first one, electric ferry, passenger and vehicle ferry. And I will not drag you through the sort of the ins and outs of it, but in the coming years, we have now launched out of 200 ferries total in Norway, 70 of them are now electric or electric hybrid. And this is an extremely rapid pace of change if you look at sort of the way normally you change in the shipping market for basically, since it's a complete technology change. Last year we launched the biggest electric ferry so far with a capacity of 200 cars and 600 passengers. And the goal is to make all our ferries zero emission by 2025. And to do that, we need to introduce also hydrogen for the longer distances. But how did we do it? And I think this is the interesting part, because this is a technology change that doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't come along with everybody doing whatever they've been doing for the last 50 years in the ferry industry, because it goes without saying that if you do a feasibility study and look at the cost of keeping the old diesel ferry versus building a new electric ferry, there is an added cost to this, even though the running of electric ferries are much cheaper than diesel ferries. But of course there is an added cost, and to mitigate that cost you need to do one simple thing. You need to get the government and the ferry owners together and mitigate the cost, because otherwise the cost will fall on the passengers, and that will, like in any democratic country, that will not do, simply enough. So there need to be a cost mitigation, but there also need to be an element of force. And the way we did the force was basically saying to the ferry companies that whenever a ferry line is up for a new tender, the public road network in Norway, which basically is the tendering authority, they said, you will get the tender for 10 years. The winner of the competition will get the tender for 10 years, but we will only accept the winner which has a plan for zero emission. And of course, together with the zero emission demand comes also a certain amount of flexibility in terms of subsidies to do the installation of electric charging stations and what have you not. So basically there's a predictability in the way that they can change buy the new electric ferry, so they know they will have at least 10 years for down payment, and they will get some extra help for installing whatever new apparatus they need at port side to dock for electric propulsion. So this is a very, very strong element of cooperation, but also, of course, whenever you deal with the government, I say this as a government employee, there is also an element of a bit of force, coercion from the government side. There is no such thing as a free lunch. So if we then move into, and I'll try to limit myself here. There's a lot of interesting things to go into. Having been in Greece for 3 years, I know that the first reaction when I talk to Greeks about Norwegian shipping industry is that, yeah, but you're Norwegian. You do things because you're nice. Yeah, you do things because you have blue eyes and your general altruistic attitude. Well, I would like to keep that image, of course, but if you promise to don't tell anyone, I'll tell you we're not. We do this because we believe this will benefit our industry in the long run. Yes, it's painful to change in the short term. Yes, it's painful to change, especially when you're changing as fast as we did. Within 5 years, we practically turned the whole industry upside down for the short sea shipping in Norway. And now you have, a plethora of hydrogen vessels, automated vessels, electric vessels coming within all strands of short sea shipping. We had the baptism of our automated container ship, which will run between 2 factories in Norway. It was done a couple of days ago, which is like a groundbreaking technology where you have combined automation, port side and ship side and electrification, which is probably future of container shipping, but we'll make it. This is not a project which is mature yet for all the technology and the propulsion, but this will be the future, and we know that when the future comes, we will hold the technology and we will be selling it very expensively to those who want to buy it. So yes, this is not altruism. It's basically investing in our future for our shipping industry. I think just let me be clear on that. So by investing in the green shift, we have basically built a new industry in Norway, a new industry which we are now exporting throughout the world. And we have taken the cost of being the first mover, and we're now reaping the rewards of being the first mover. So, but let me end by saying a few words about what is the relevance for Greece. You remember my first 5 points. The ailing fleet, their knowledge of the regulations are coming because domestic shipping will get regulations. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when and how much. We had, and the third one was the domestic shipbuilding capacity, which was in a slump. The fourth was the large domestic market. Does this sound vaguely familiar to anyone? This could be a description of Greece. You have an ailing ferry fleet, you know the regulations are coming, you need to revamp the domestic shipbuilding industry, and what was the fifth? The fifth was the political will to change. Because the industry can't change alone. It needs a clear political will and a clear political guidance and an element of coercion to change. And of course, I think from a Norwegian side, we are looking into the Greek market as a very, very interesting market for technology export. Meaning that, okay, we took the cost of being the first mover, and our prototypes will not necessarily be the prototypes you would introduce in Greece, because we're an Arctic country, obviously you're not. So I think there is now a window of opportunity where if you get the Norwegian technology to travel, adapting it to Greece, and using your large home market as a way to get the technology up to a level where basically you are experts in it, you could pretty much dominate the Mediterranean market for electric shipping. Turkey wants to do the same, and they are a bit ahead of Greece at the moment in terms of building electric vessels. But Greece has the home market. You have the home market. So why not use it? And I think I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for being nice. It was in fact a very interesting story, and of course I think that we can all see the parallels with our situation here in Greece. But in order to dig a little bit deeper on the situation here in Greece, there is no one better than Mr. Alexandratos, representing the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping and the Short Sea Shipping Association, and I would like to ask him to give us his views on the challenges, needs, and of course his personal ones as a general manager of Apollonia Lines when it comes to greening the short sea shipping segment.
Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much. First of all, I have to tell you that it is an honor for me to attend at this interesting forum, and specifically this interesting panel amongst, I would say, with friends. It's not the first time that we met together. And as I am not only involved in shipping, but I am fellow also with Mrs. Olga Bornozi, as we are acting at theater for charity reasons. Please share your big applause to Mr. Bornozis and to the team of Capital Link Forum that they organized this forum in Greece. Also, I had a phone call. I'm the only one, I think, today that I'm representing two presidents, as I wear the two hats. So you have the warmest regards, both from my president, the Greek Chamber of Shipping, Dr. George Pateras, who is now currently he's sleeping, I think, but because he's Bahamas and he's not for vacations. He's in very few hours he'll be at an engine room. So there is a better person that could explain those technical reasons, George Pateras, because Dr. George Pateras is not, apart from his capabilities, he's a technical expert. I have also to disclose you that before 2-3 weeks, we had an excellent meeting, deep conversation, true conversation with Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador. It lasted for about 3 hours. And when the meeting ended, and I guided Your Excellency.
It was my fault.
No, it was not your fault. It was your knowledge. And I guided him to the entrance, to the exit. I said, "You are ambassador of Norway, or you are an expert in shipping and the next step for zero emissions?" Because honestly, with all respect and all my experience, I have met with a lot of ambassadors. I mean, you're deeply in those technical issues, and with Dr. George Pateras, the conversation ended up to 3 hours. So, now, the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping, for those that they possibly don't know, is a public entity, and we are the official advisors to the state regarding how the shipping, the maritime sector and shipping can be developed, and how economy, also the Greek economy, could be strengthened more from Greek maritime sector. We have close to 26,000 floating members from all the categories, and of course, short sea, that today is the main topic. Now, regarding your question as what are the general views of the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping, and what could the main advice give to the government? Okay, I have the honor to be the Vice President of Greek Chamber of Shipping, but I will also speak also from the hat of a ship owner, of a second generation ship owner. We all Balkarians. So I would say, if not pessimistic, I'm very, very, very much concerned. We say, leading the Greek revolution to zero emissions. And make me wonder, who is the leader and who is leading us? Is this a revolution or is a vague attempt of transition? And are zero emissions at the end of the day a feasible task or an utopia? I stay on one word that from the thousands that you used, and they're useful, most of them, is change. From the day I'm occupied and involved in shipping, since 1998, full-time job, a word change was coming every year. So, us now, the shipping industry, we are asked to fulfill absolutely necessary uphill struggle, I think, while we are not in control of many things. First of all, technology is the domain of scientists. New equipment and systems are at the hands of manufacturers. Green energy sources depend on the providers, and infrastructure and the supply chain remain to be constructed. So, nothing, according to my opinion, depends on us, except the implementation, when all these are available and viable. And if so, still remains the question of finance. Now, the quiz is much more difficult for the ocean shipping to resolve. Tell us, how can a ship owner decide today which system to rely when considering to renew his fleet? Before giving you some data from the short shipping, we all have to know that the emissions from ships that carries 90% of the world trade are nearly to 2% of CO2. And today, I took a taxi from Kifissia to come here to this hotel. Has a lot of traffic. I made about 1 hour and 30 minutes, and I met thousands of cars with one driver each, and I very much wonder the universities to effect a study and tell us what was the CO2 emission only from Kifissia, the 1 hour and 30 minutes, up to this hotel. Now, going back to the short sea shipping, you have also the warm regards of Mr. Simantonis, the president of this union. Short sea shipping, in its various forms, what short sea shipping can be interpreted in a lot of means. I would say that there is an advantage for the short sea shipping regarding and implementing the steps that already Norway had achieved. Because the difference with short sea shipping and the difference with ferries, for example, if we are going to take those two categories to the electric batteries, the short sea shipping does not require very, very high speed. They can go up to 11, 12 knots depending on the time charter. So that is an advantage. So electric battery cells seems to be gaining ground, particularly in Northern Europe and more particularly in Norway. And of course, electric power at your country is more green. The installation of stations is progressing. Unfortunately, here in Greece, and I cannot disclose in name one example, they are not progressing. Because one passenger, you remember we disclosed you when you were in the Greek Chamber of Shipping, they tried to make cold airing at one port. It was at Kyllini, actually, for 1 hour, blackout, and nobody wanted again to repair that, and back to the future, back to the present. So, now, the use of green hydrogen, for example, produced through electrolysis of seawater and powered by wind generators, appears to be a sensible solution, subject, of course, cost. Most people are prejudiced as regards nuclear energy, but apparently the molten salt technology seems to be a much safer use. Also, I think that legislation has to provide initiatives and motivations for somebody to proceed at a further stage. Yesterday we have, with the Hellenic Short Sea Ship Owners Association, where I also have the honor to be a General Secretary, we have a webinar with DNV and Norway, and there were many questions raised about what actually will happen in 2030, what are the costs, because everybody here is breathing the same air, but does not pay the same cost for breathing the same air. So, in concluding, this is my personal comment at your question, having reviewed all data, all those presentations, and simultaneously, for the hopefully next years that those things cannot be applied, it reminds me of a great TV show that I was watching when I was young and still is The Blind Date. So I think we're living at the blind date, and we're expecting anxiously the wall to open and see what we paid for. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexandratos. Yeah, I can fully sympathize with the uncertainty, the need for various stakeholders to cooperate, which is not always given. And the synergies that may be required in order to arrive to a very good blind date at the end of the day. I would also like to hear from Mr. Hyiotopoulos his views regarding the zero-emission shipping in Greek coastal and CC applications, what he sees as potential and challenges. I think that we will have a complementary view from the class perspective as well.
Thank you, George. I would say that I would try to give you, let's say, the general perspective here. What are we trying to do? We are trying to increase awareness. We are trying to say to the Greek community that, guys, we have done it. The situation is more or less the same like yours, and we know how to do it. Are you willing to listen to us? Well, we want you to transfer knowledge to you. Are you willing to listen and cooperate with us? We can make it together. I think that's more or less what we're trying to say here to all of you. So we will have various rounds and increasing awareness sessions also in connection with Poseidonia. But I would like to focus on two words that were sent by the previous gentleman. One from Frode about will. I think willingness is very important. However, I believe the most important thing here is collective willingness. And in Norway, there was a collective willingness to do that change. Okay. And it happened. Being Greek, I have to say that I'm not very optimistic about our collective willingness. Okay, sorry to say that, but that's a reality. Also, one important factor is that they don't only have the know-how, they also have the representative office here with the knowledge, and people from Greek people having this knowledge in order to transfer it to the Greek industry. I mean, the project management of the Green Shipping Norway project was DNV. And DNV has a big office also here. So, I mean, the solution is right in front of you. And going to Mr. Alexandratos' comment about change. Yes, we want to change. We want to become greener. However, whenever you are changing, somebody's gaining and somebody's losing. And the fight is always who pays the bill at the end of the day. Right. Now, I have seen, I cannot disclose you the source, but I have seen feasibility studies on ferries, or ferries. I mean, what are we talking about? It's a small thing. It's maybe 40 meters, it's maybe 80 meters long. It's something which, with a cost of roughly from 3 to 5 million. Most of it can be built right now in Greece as we speak, except the energy source and the control of energy source. So we're talking about the batteries and the controlling of the batteries. So, and this, you have the people here who can tell you how to do it. I think it's only a matter of somebody pressing the button, somebody having the will to press a button and Maybe it's not some of the gentlemen that we are here in the panel. Somebody above us has to do that. But if we want to have a country which we would be feeling proud of, and not having this 50-year-old, very heavily polluting ferries around our islands, if we want really to be stepping into the future, I think that somebody has to press this button. So that was all from my side. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Mr. Chotopoulos. What I get from all the people in the panel up to now is that we're talking about cooperation, we're talking about collective willingness to change. We're talking about multiple entities and stakeholders working together. So in that respect, I would like to ask Professor Lyridis to be able to say a little bit more about regarding the complete value chain around short sea shipping, meaning not only the ship, but also the technology, the energy providers, the port that we heard about it as well, and what is the necessary integration and synergies between all these stakeholders to make this happen, including the government as well.
Thank you very much, George. It's been an honor to be here, and earlier in this place I saw Mr. Hadjipetrou of Columbia Ship Management, and I remembered a quote by his CEO, Mark O'Neill, who is also the chairman of Intermanager, that said that shipping needs a kind of King Arthur-style roundtable to promote its interests. And it's not a Greek problem. In Greece, indeed, 3 Greeks have 4 opinions, that's true. But even in the entire shipping industry, I haven't seen a more coordinated approach to the shipping interests. And I think this is a major problem. Regarding now the reality in Greece, of course there are problems. I think your question has 2 sides. One is the electric shipping, that's the very small open ferries, and the other is the general short sea shipping. I think for most of the short sea shipping, the previous speaker, Mr. Plevrakis, has very well addressed the problems. I may say a few things as well, but regarding the electric shipping, I will tell you a few things that hamper the adoption of electric shipping for the small distances. There is indeed already a design from a very large investor who has already paid for the design of an electric ship. The design is ready. They're looking for money to build it. There will be an announcement at some time. The cost is around 8.5 million for an 80-meter open ferry. You will hear about it at some point. There are 2 major problems. One is the major one is the legislation regarding selling electricity. This is a major problem. There are rules that the regulatory authority has not resolved yet. They should. The owner of the grid, the port that sells the electricity, cannot buy and sell electricity to the ship owner, because they cannot. The 2 activities are unbundled, the grid operation and the trading of electricity. So this has not been resolved yet. There have been proposals. We have also made a lot of initiatives because we have studied this also with the Association of Passenger Shipping. There are ways to resolve it, but it's still a problem. The second problem is to fund this large investment, because these open ferries, they're already barely making it on conventional fuels. For an endeavor like this to be successful, in order for the project to work, it needs sort of a 50%, I wouldn't like to call it subsidy, but it's a subsidy, it's a grant anyway. State aid rules currently, which are also true in Norway, they're aligned with the EU, do not allow shipping to be funded directly from the state, any ship, for very specific reasons, for social reasons, for very remote areas, like we do with our common interest lines, Agones Grames. There are exemptions, but for the places where the open ferries work, they cannot be subject to this derogation or exemption from legislation. So there's always the problem of state aid, and this is why shipping cannot be supported. Actually, shipbuilding has been a sunset industry since the 80s and has been a negative looked at since the 50s, the time of coal and steel, the Euratom. So it is legislation does not allow subsidizing. There might be indirect ways to subsidize it, but these all have to be resolved with the European Union, which is not indeed a Greek initiative. And then on top of this, we have all the requirements with the Fit for 55, a set of regulations and directives that have to be transposed to the Greek legislation that make it even more difficult. So I think for electric shipping there is will, there is the possibility, because actually it's the only shipbuilding product we are exporting. We used to export in Russia anyway. We're exporting to Brazil, to other countries in Europe as well, but it's the only thing we do export. Small open ferries. Even retrofits are expensive because the batteries and the BMS mentioned earlier, the battery management system, costs a little bit more than the actual ship. Regarding short sea shipping, this is a problem. It's also rumored that in the next MEPC it will be decided that the Mediterranean will also become an ECA area, emission control area, which will present even bigger challenges for shipping. So there, short sea shipping needs to find a way to adapt. Which technology will be adopted is not so easy to say because all have problems. But I think I have to revert to my earlier comment that there needs to be a closer cooperation between all the stakeholders, as all the speakers have just said, from all the stakeholders, in order to promote the interests of shipping. And it's not the interest of shipping per se. Shipping covers a social need. To this moment, the attempts have been, and I think the biggest challenge, I will say it like this, the biggest challenge is not the regulations that are currently being adopted. It is the societal move, the mentality that changes, that will eventually force also cargo owners to demand even stricter regulations than the ones are currently imposed by IMO. And this will be done mainly through the European Union, which maybe not unilaterally, but at least will promote or push towards stricter regulation even more in the future. So this has to be taken into account. We have to be a little bit more proactive, especially in Greece, on how we promote shipping and how promote the interests of shipping and at least the needs of shipping. And this has to be demonstrated, but it has to be done in a more collective way. Already we see the business model that changes. It's not the small ship owners anymore that outsource their management to big companies like Columbia or Vish Ships. It is, I should say, the big management companies that outsource ship ownership to smaller owners. So we have to keep all this in mind. The legislation becomes more and more complicated and it will be more difficult in the future. Of course, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about Greek shipping because they know how to travel on rough waters. But still, things are becoming more and more science than art as it was in the past.
Thank you very much, Professor Lyridis. Being conscious of the time and concluding this very interesting session, hearing all the panel participants, I frankly don't know if we are collectively optimistic or not regarding the revolution on greening the short sea and coastal shipping. But more important than being optimistic, I think that we have achieved something. We are pragmatic. We know what has been done. We know what are the success stories, but we also know, understand and acknowledge the challenges and the specific needs that we have to overcome as Greek short sea shipping cluster. And I believe that this is the first point of consensus, to understand what are the challenges ahead and the ways we need to change and we need to cooperate. The technology is there. The communication, I believe it is there as well. And then we need to aim and go for it at the end of the day. I would like to sincerely thank all our panel participants very much. Mr. Andersen, the ambassador of Norway to Greece, Mr. Alexandratos, Mr. Hyiotopoulos, and Professor Lyridis. Thank you very much.